Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Albie and I am Jake, and in this video I'm going to be talking about making cutting boards, whether that's using really fancy tools like I do in this video or using more basic tools like hand tools, saws, planes, stuff like that. Now I'm going to also go over the time that it roughly takes to make these things, the price that I paid for 2 or 3 cutting boards, and best practices I find when it comes to making cutting boards and making little projects. So with all that being said, let's get right into it where I'm cutting some pieces down to width. Now, as you can see, I'm using a table saw to cut all of these things down to width. You don't need a table saw whatsoever. You can use things like a circular saw, a hand saw. It is not required that you have huge table saws and big tools. All of these processes can be done with hand tools or hand power tools just as well. Maybe it just takes a little bit longer. Now, I make these cutting boards within about a couple hours. The whole filming of this video took me around an hour and a half. They are pretty quick projects to make. You can make them within a weekend, especially if someone you know wants to start woodworking. Basic cutting boards is something that's really easy to get into. Now, online you can see these huge inlays, end grain cutting boards, all that. End grain cutting boards won't take much longer, but it is a lot harder on tools when you are doing it, and they can last longer, but really if you're taking care of any cutting board, they can last a really long time. The main thing is when you're making these cutting boards, the glue that you use, you make sure that is water resistant or waterproof so that when you do wash these, that they don't fall apart. One of the other big things is never dishwash these cutting boards, as the heat can also affect the wood, not only just the glue. So I recommend if you're giving these to someone, make sure that they know it's hand wash only. If you're selling them, put it with a little plaque or something that you give to them saying, hand wash only, do not dishwash, board can fall apart. Basically is what I'm saying with that. One of the other big things that you're going to experience with cutting boards is sanding. Sanding takes a hell of a lot of time within making cutting boards. I tend to sand at 3 grits. I sand at 80, 120, 240. Now, some people also say you should sand at 180 or something like that. I don't really find it's necessary. I find I can still get the sand marks out of cutting boards. Now, if I'm doing a more fine furniture project where I need absolutely perfect sanding, yes, I might go that in between grit as well. But when it comes to cutting boards, they are being used. They're gonna get scratched up anyway. I think as long as they have a good finish to begin with, you're not going to really have an issue as long as you take care when you're sanding. So let's talk about the time that it takes to make these cutting boards. Now, I say it takes me an hour and a half. That's with big tools and a little bit of knowledge when it comes to making cutting boards. Now, I'm not the greatest when it comes to all this stuff. There are woodworkers and furniture makers that can make absolutely stellar cutting boards. I tend to just stick with very simple, long grain cutting boards with a little bit of an edge profile that again I cut on the table saw. Now, the edge profile that I do, you can do it with a hand saw, you can do it with a plane, you can do it with a lot of other tools. You can do it with a router if you want a different type of edge profile. But when it comes down to it, you just want a cutting board to look good for you. I tend to do the edge profile at around 25 degrees. I try and leave around 10 to 15 mil so I can do a 3 mil round along the top, making sure that none of the edges are too sharp. That's another thing when you are hand sanding. Yes, you can use an orbital for everything and that's totally good. I try when I'm sanding different corners and stuff to not use an orbital, as it creates little bits of inconsistencies where I think hand sanding you can definitely make it a lot better looking. So that's something that I do there. Now, one of the things that is really crucial when you're making cutting boards is water popping them. What it does is it raises the grain between sanding grits so that when you're using the sink, it doesn't raise the grain nearly as much and it doesn't become very fuzzy over time. It takes a lot longer to become fuzzy. Now, end grain cutting boards, that's one of the reasons they come into really their own league. Not only that the end grain cutting boards will be a little bit more cut resistant, but they also have less effect on water popping, because when it will water pop, it will water pop along the face grain, not along the edge grain. So that's another reason to maybe get into edge grain cutting boards. Something that I've thought about. I'm just not really someone that wants to put in the time and effort to make end grain cutting boards, as they take a hell of a lot longer because you need a lot more glue ups. if you want to make a really good looking one. When I water pop, I do a first sand at 80 grit, then I just wet it all down, I leave it to fully dry out, then I come back and I sand at 120, water pop again, sand at 240. I might even, if it's still popping really hard at the 240 mark, water pop again, then sand again. But at that point, it is what it is. I'm doing another sand after the finish sets in anyway, so it's totally like, I don't really mind it. The finish I tend to use is a mix of tung oil and a wax finish, just to make it feel really nice, make it nice and food safe, make it a little bit more water resistant when it comes to washing it and food prep. Just make sure that all the finishes that you are using are food safe. That is something that is really crucial when you're doing it, as well as the timbers that you use. Now you can search online and find timbers that are food safe pretty easily. In Australia, the main ones that we use are blackbutt. I know it's food safe, but that's totally fine. The other main thing that you want to look at when you are looking for timbers is voids, cracks, crevices, stuff like that you're going to have to fill. That is something that is really obnoxious, but it's something that you have to do if it's on top of it, on top of the food prep surface, as you don't want food getting caught in there and it eventually rotting. That just comes into all different territories of food contamination that I don't want to get into. These are really simple projects that if you're a parent and you want your kid to get into woodworking with you, they show a bit of interest, bring them in, make a cutting board with them, as it's something that not only you guys will use in your household. Everyone always needs cutting boards. I find wood cutting boards a hell of a lot better than almost any other material. I always find that wood cutting boards are not only easy to make, they're ultra customizable. They're so easy to customize, whether that's laser engraving, actual engraving, inlay, like pattern work. There's so much you can do within cutting boards as a whole that you can make any cutting board look any way that you really want. And even when it comes to adding things like feet, handles, that is just another realm of additions that it can make to make cutting boards way more customizable. And cutting boards can also technically be used as serving trays. Like, it's the same process, so cutting boards and serving trays go hand in hand when it comes to making things. But I know there's quite a lot of information out there. This video is not the end all to make cutting boards. Like, there are heaps of makers that can probably make way better looking ones for a video to show you guys. But I think making simple cutting boards is something that's very necessary for a lot of homes. It's something that you can whip together with a hand plane and a saw and a bit of sandpaper. Like, realistically, they're 3 tools that you need to make a cutting board. You don't need a table saw, a jointer, an orbital sander, a planer, a thicknesser, all this type of shit. If you have a handsaw, a hand plane, or even a power plane, maybe a router if you want to get like super fancy, but you can do a lot of edge profiles with planers, with hand planes as well, and a bit of sandpaper. You don't even need an orbital sandpaper. It will take a hell of a lot longer hand sanding, but at the end of the day, it's what it is. Probably the only other main thing that you need is clamps. They're relatively cheap and you really only need 2. I think at the end of it, this is just a really good project to show off your skills as a maker, and it's really good to hone in certain hand tool skills. Now, whether that's learning how to joint a board properly, or learning how to sand with the grain instead of against the grain, like little things that maybe if you're an experienced woodworker that you might not think about anymore, a beginner woodworker might not know these things, and it's up to you to teach them and share your knowledge with them. But guys, that brings us to the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to catch you on the next one. If you like the video, YouTube will think you like this one next. Anyway guys, see ya.